I would like to start by just clarifying that I'm not going to be speaking very much about standards. Gianluca gave a very good explanation of what sustainability standards look like. Fairtrade also is a set of sustainability standards covering many of the same aspects. But I would like to talk about business, which is what farmers engage in. And this morning, before I caught my flight in Cologne, I read in a newspaper that next week, Monday at 12 o'clock, the 7th billion citizen of this planet will be born. I don't know how they know that this person will be born at 12 o'clock GMT, but it must be true because I read it in a newspaper. We will have 7 billion people on this planet next week, Monday at 12 o'clock. Of the 7 billion people, about 2.6 billion are small farmers, and they produce food for more than 60% of the population of this planet. So we're not going to solve some of the biggest problems of our era without thinking how to help small farmers, 2.6 billion of them, create sustainable businesses, because that is what they do not have. It's one of the reasons why Fairtrade exists. It exists to break down barriers, to help small farmers develop business cases that work on the market, and it's been very successful in that regard. We have the privilege of working directly with 1.7 million of these small farmers. And I think it's also important for the rest of my presentation to keep in mind that we see entire supply chains. As Gianluca explained, Rainforest Alliance has a very unique focus on the production part of a supply chain, which we are learning from a lot as well. But Fairtrade is a system that leads up to a consumer brand. So we see an entire supply chain, which is really interesting if you think about carbon footprinting. But before we get to carbon footprinting, I would like us to take a step back and see what is the reality facing these, the producers of the world's food. Well, some snapshots. This is Nicaragua. And on the left-hand side, the green area is where today you can grow high-quality Arabica coffee. And on the right-hand side, give or take a couple of degrees or half a degrees in terms, depending on the climate model you use, this is where you will be able to grow Arabica coffee in a couple of years' time. Some of you might have met my colleague Andre, who was here since yesterday, recently went to Nicaragua, and the process is faster than anybody expected. So these are people's livelihoods that are in danger in a very real way. We have, if you look more specifically, another crop, tea, for instance, this is Kenya, and on the right-hand side, it shows that, if you look at the slide, it shows how unfair climate change is in a way. This area, unfortunately, I don't have a pointer, but if you look at the right-hand side where it says Mount Kenya, in that area there is a Fairtrade producer, certified producer organization called Kenyan Tea Development Association, with about 75,000 small farmers and their families living there. They make a living growing and selling tea. And where it says Nakuru Kericho, there is another organization. They're competitors on the local market, let's say. And climate change is not going to affect these two organizations equally. It will affect them differently. If there is a temperature increase of 2%, the people around the Mount Kenya area will not have a business anymore. They will not be able to grow tea anymore. When we started a research project in October of 2009 to see what will the impact of climate change be on the business case of a small farmer, obviously we came into contact with this type of research and a lot more in terms of what is probably going to happen. So we asked, in order to get much more direct feedback, the 1.7 million small farmers in the Fairtrade system, we asked them some basic questions about how is your business being affected by climate change. And these were, we received a lot of feedback across all the crop varieties that Fairtrade is involved in, across all the continents that we work in. And the responses were not very scientific, but these were farmers saying, it's not raining when it should rain. My grandfather started talking about the fact that if it keeps not raining like it is not raining now, that we will have to take out the apple trees and plant something else because we can't grow apples anymore. And my father said the same thing, and I've done it now. We don't have apple trees anymore. We now plant olives, something else that can survive now. Farmers are really responded very, very strongly to these questions about how their businesses are affected by what they see as permanent changes in the weather. They didn't really try and prove that it's related to climate change. It's not really important. What is interesting about the second point is that the absolute majority of farmers knew that there are different ways of doing things to help you survive climate change as a business and help you to, if you would like to mitigate the impact of climate change or be a part of the solution, but they don't have access to it because of knowledge barriers and investment barriers. It costs money to change, always. They were surprisingly informed about the fact that the market is changing. This is where we, as Fairtrade, this is what we do. We investigate barriers that exist in markets between these small farmers and us as consumers, where we started really getting interested. What is changing in the market around climate change and broader in terms of sustainability? And at that time, this survey was conducted in February of 2010. And at that time, 1 out of every 5 respondents were already put on notice by their buyers saying, have your carbon footprint assessed or else. We might not be so interested in purchasing your product anymore, or we are really interested in seeing the carbon footprint of your product. So that was also very interesting. So we asked ourselves, so what is this big change? Is there something changing in the market, something fundamental? And we found, yes, something's changing in the market. And it's not going to come through regulation. It's not going to come, maybe one day it comes through regulation. Businesses are changing much quicker than regulation ever can. When a giant buyer of food like Unilever makes a decision like this, or Tesco makes a decision like this, the effect across the supply chain is almost instant. Walmart, they conducted their supplier sustainability questionnaire last year, and the feedback process was, they asked them questions, 15 questions about sustainability. You will be familiar with this. And have you had the carbon footprint of the product assessed? Have you assessed what's happening to waste across the supply chain of the product that you are offering to us? And depending on your answers, we will give you a score. Depending on the score, you will be either fit into or not fit into our preferred purchasing program. And that is, in commercial language, another way of saying, we're not going to buy from you in the long term if you do not move rapidly towards providing us with a truly sustainable product as we define it. And this is the important part for a small farmer. There is not one definition of sustainability. There are as many definitions nowadays as there are buyers, in a way. That's also one of the issues with labels out there. If you are growing coffee and you are selling coffee to more than one market, and suddenly you are selling to Tesco's. Tesco's decide, they didn't do this, but let's say that they would decide to move coffee under their carbon footprint label that they're working on with the Carbon Trust. You as a coffee farmer, you have to respond, or you face damaging your business case. The speed with which this market is changing also we found surprising. Fairtrade. The value of Fairtrade retail sales is now at around 4 billion euros at retail value. That grew from 500 million euros a couple of years ago. It grew very quickly. And in the UK, one of the strongest Fairtrade markets, where the recognition of the Fairtrade label is very strong, it took 15 years to achieve that size, whereas sales under the carbon label just shot up just like that. So the speed with which the market is changing is also something that we really took note of. So what we did is we looked at all of this feedback that we got through our research work, and we asked ourselves 3 questions. We said, how can we use the systems we have already built up in order to do something that is cost-effective here? Because obviously, if you're a small farmer, what you don't have is a lot of money in order to pay for all the changes that are going to come to standards if your requirements across supply chains develop. So what can we do that's cost effective in terms of accounting for greenhouse gases across supply chains? And in the process of doing that, can we identify potential to make changes in farming systems that will help producers to survive climate change, for their businesses to survive climate change? And then, is it possible to convince some of the buyers of the products to invest in making these changes happen through a business concept we call insetting, about which I'll tell you in a second. I don't want to talk a lot about Fairtrade, but it's relevant to say, why do we feel that we've got a unique role to play here? Well, we have a global reach, which is, as I mentioned, we have contact to about 1.7 million small farmers and workers across the globe. But on the right-hand side, there is actually, from a technical perspective, one of the reasons why we are really interesting. We have a closed supply chain. So one set of standards, if you take a normal coffee supply chain, for instance, the producer, the washing station, the grower, the washing station, all the way through the exporter, the importer, all the way to the packaged product. We gather data across the supply chain. And on the other end, we have, just conscious of time, contact on a very strategic brand level often with some of these companies that when they make decisions, they can change things. They can really make big changes. So we started two business approaches. First of all, we investigated these carbon footprints. We looked at rice from India and from Thailand, flowers from Kenya and Ecuador. These are roses. Coffee, tea, bananas. There's a lot that I can tell you about what we've learned. It was extremely interesting. That is a snapshot of rice, indicating really where the emissions lie. These were not life cycle analysis. They don't take consumer use into consideration up to retail value until they're in the shop, because it also gives a bit of a better spotlight on what happens on farm level and where one can change things. We've learned a lot. We're continuing with this process. And very recently, there was a producer organization in India that requested us to perform a carbon footprint of their product because they believe that it adds a new USP to their product, a unique selling point. They believe that they can increase the sales of their product because they have a carbon footprint at their level, at farm gate level, saying this is the carbon footprint of our tea as we sell it to you. So very interesting for them. And just moving on very quickly, insetting is where we have convinced buyers to make investments in their own supply chain. So it is a way of turning something which many people see, we can debate this, but many people see offsetting as a sort of a CSR investment, a marketing thing. Insetting, a CSR investment, a marketing investment that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your core business. You might be buying coffee and selling it to consumers, and another part of your business buys carbon credits in order to make claims in the public. We are carbon neutral, we have reduced our carbon footprint. Why not combine the two? Why not try to purchase your carbon credits from the source where you get your product from? And we have now successfully completed several insetting projects. We are being tight about communication around it because it's going to be launched in January. And I'm really, really happy to be here today. It's my first time at the PCF. I always wanted to come. Something always happened, and I hope to come again. And the next time that I come around, we can then talk more about, because then it would have been launched publicly. But I can give you some examples. For instance, there's a business, a very big brand, a multinational brand, that have recently converted all of a specific product to Fairtrade. Another part of their business buy thousands and thousands of voluntary emissions reductions, carbon credits every year. So we have now found a way through developing several projects within the Fairtrade system for them to buy all of those credits from within the system. By doing this, they have made the creation of agroforestry projects in Peru possible. And this leads to all sorts of things. It has led to increasing the yield of the product because of the shade cover that was not there before in the specific group. It increases the quality of the soil, the water resistance of the soil, which means that the whole farming system becomes more resilient to climate change. And, of course, it is has fundamentally changed the business case for the farmer organization. Suddenly, they move from being a supplier of a product to being a supplier of a product and an integral part of a CSR corporate strategy and a branding strategy. It's great. It sort of cemented their position in that supply chain. Another example would be in Kenya. There's a project where we're starting around providing clean drinking water and to a community around an area where there are several farms, Fairtrade farms, where we're inviting businesses to invest in this project, which is where products come from. And by doing this, they will be able to achieve a lot of very positive health benefits for the community there. From a brand perspective, it's really interesting. These businesses, once we convince them to convert to Insetting, all then sort of take one step to they don't really want to then talk to the consumer about carbon neutrality anymore. It's sort of, they want to then talk about things like, by buying this product, you are helping to improve the health of these children in Kenya. By buying this product, you're helping this community in Peru to have a more sustainable farming system and so on. Oh, and by the way, yes, of course, there's a carbon credit behind it as well. I would like to end off with, because, you know, asking the question, environmental footprinting and how will it shape the corporate agenda? Well, I butchered and stole these two slides from one of our multinational clients, one of the clients that are multinational organizations that are making really big commitments now to fair trade and sustainability. This is some of their research, and it sort of says it there. You know, the respect for nature in the world in 2020, as they see it, respect in nature will drive business decisions enforced by government pressures, taxes, and consumer scrutiny. So that's why businesses will want to be quicker. And of course, also on the last little box there, growing scrutiny towards big corporations will demand full transparency, which is something where carbon footprinting can play a tremendously amazing role, specifically if you communicate about it in a smart way. And then lastly, how consumers' behavior is changing. I remember that when we spoke to this company about this slide, they said that they see a future where consumers participate in the conceptualization of products through social media forums. They really want to get involved now. They don't want to have something given to them. They want to be part of the creation of something, or at least feel as if they're part of the creation of something, which is why we are receiving such very positive commercial resonance to the concept of insetting, because it gives a whole range of new connecting points between product and a consumer at the point of sale, where you can tell a story that you couldn't tell before. So, how will environmental footprinting shape the corporate agenda? It will be one of the components that will shape it very, very fundamentally, because it answers two of these very, very key issues. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time, and I'm glad to answer any questions you might have.